The following podcast is brought to you by Mint Mobile. Support Moore's Laws by clicking that link in the description and signing up for 3 months of Mint Mobile that, well, if you do it through that link, also gives you another 3 months free. And then also this podcast is supported by the Salad app. Download the Salad app with the link in the description to support the channel. And if you do so, you can earn rewards with your gaming PC or rendering PC while it's not doing its normal tasks. And then it is also brought to you by Ramen. Use offer code Broken Silicon to get 10% off tasty, healthy ramen and other great powders on their website. And we'll talk about these sponsors more later. But for now, let's just get on with the show. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I am joined by the person I've been joined by 4 years, 19, 20, 21, 22. Is this the fifth year in a row? I think this is the fifth year in a row. 19,
is this the fifth year? I was about to say,
yeah, it's 2023.
But damn, it's been that long?
Yeah, I have the first episode you were on, and that was 2019, so... I mean, yeah.
Whoa, where has the time gone? I have no idea. That's crazy.
I know. Well, they can tell where the time's gone at least a little bit, because if you go back, and link will be in the description to the first time you were on, our hair is twice as long. So at least you can count it, at least in the inches of hair that we've just decided to leave there sometimes, I guess. I'm speaking for myself. It's not like I'm planning this. It's just, oh, look at that. My hair's long.
Yeah. I mean, that's like, I feel like that's why long hair is the best, because you just need to worry about it less. That's kind of the main perk of it.
Well, I'll tell you that lately for me, it's just been like in my face the whole time. So people don't be surprised if I get back here in January and then it's just gone. But all right. So as we've established, you've been on many times before, but it's been a year since you've been on last, so please introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And how's 2023 been?
I am Dawid. I do tech stuff, and 2023 has been a good year. Oh, I mean, it's been interesting. Like, I think in terms of channel, it's been good. It's been a bit weird personal life-wise, but we're like, it happens, I guess.
Oh, no, I mean, I would agree. From my perspective, at least, especially the first half of the year when all of the tech news was going off, I mean, I had the biggest months I've had. And yet at the same time, tons of things with some family members. I moved in with someone in a new house. So it's been quite chaotic. And I'm hoping next year will be a little more, stable. But, I will say in terms of tech news, I talked about this in the last video I put out. At least from my perspective, it kind of has been like an odd year that has, and I don't know if you'll agree, but like a lot of the things we were talking about or looking forward to at the beginning of this year ended up very differently than what I would have expected. At least from my perspective, more different than I think almost any other year covering this space.
Oh, okay. So you haven't gotten used to being disappointed by all the crap yet at that point? Is that what you're saying? Or
well, like, to give some examples, right? RDNA 3 surprised in that it wasn't as strong as AMD said it would be. But it's 20% weaker than expected. In the grand scheme of things, it was still a decent uplift, and but that generation has ended up outselling the previous one so far. So it's selling well. And then the product I was most excited for this year was Meteor Lake, and that was not as good as I expected it to be, not remotely as good. And in fact, even like the Raptor Lake refresh from Intel was, there's been a lot of things that I expected to come out. Tons of them have been delayed till next year. The things that haven't been, some of them have either done better than expected or way more than 20% worse than I expected.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that the kind of like 7th gen AMD, well, I guess 7th gen is not the correct word, but the 7000 series cards have been selling better. How is their sales comparing to like the current Nvidia stuff?
Well, So it's all relative because, of course, Nvidia is still holding most of the market. But at least from what I can tell, and you can see this from Tech Epiphany's tracking of sales at Mind Factory in Europe, and from what I'm seeing in AMD reporting, like, for example, in the recent earnings, they reported that gaming revenue is about flat, but the only reason it's slightly down is because of semi-custom revenue, which seems to be lower Xbox sales, actually.
Oh, okay.
And they said that it's remained almost flat, though, despite that, because Radeon sales are higher than expected. So it's hard to say market share, especially when it's like, and I, I see people arguing about like how many of these are shipped for gamers and used for that. And it's just like, I honestly, how many of these Lovelace cards are even being used for gaming? Do we even really know? Like I talk to people at Micro Centers. They say like half the people that come in there for a 4090 openly says when they're asked checking out, like they'll say, "Oh, this looks like you'll have fun gaming with this," and they'll say, "Oh, I'm using it for AI or mining or something." And so it's really hard to say exactly what the market share is when so many of the cards being sold are clearly not being used for gaming. But AMD's sales are up. That is all we can really say in market share terms.
Well, that's good. That's good news. I think it's always good when the main competitor is the one that's kind of like struggling a bit more because competition and all that.
Yeah, I mean, but so, well, let me, speaking of main competitor, though, let's get into this question. Crass writes in and says, in 2022, NVIDIA launched a cut-down 3068 gigabyte, which I believe Dawid christened the 3060 Scumbag Edition. For Tom and Dawid, what product qualifies as the most scummy cash grab of 2023? Let you go first.
Oh, that's always hard. I don't know. I think because the first thing that comes to my mind is that whole where they kept backpedaling on what the 4080 12 gig and then like the 4070, because like if they actually went through with that, that would have been really scummy because you would have had two very different GPUs at very different price points with
literally
the same
just
game.
different cards, just different cards.
Yeah, with the same name, which would have sucked. But I don't know. Other than that, like 4060 Ti generated quite a lot of ire, and like rightfully so. But I don't know. What do you think?
Did the GT 1630 launch this year?
Oh, was this?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't remember if it did. But if it did, you could say that. I don't know if that really counts because, well, actually, who knows? Maybe Nvidia is actually selling a ton of them when you check Amazon. But let me see. Release date. Can I say that? No. Oh, no, it launched last year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's a real scumbag card. That's disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know because technically the 4080 launched last year. I pretty much, I really do kind of hate the 4080 a lot, but I mean, I guess I'd say yeah, because 4060 Ti is up there. Like for me, like it really is up there, and like I cannot believe an 8 gigabyte card for $400 there. But if it wasn't that, I mean, I don't know. I'd probably say NVIDIA laptop cards that they're calling different cards too is kind of up there as well. Because they launched Lovelace last year. Laptop version of it launched this year. So I would say I find the RTX 4070 laptops, I kind of really don't like those.
Yeah, that's a really
but
good
that point. Is the 4060 Ti, so we're basically saying the same thing.
Yeah, all roads lead to the 4060 Ti, I guess.
But well, okay, so that was the first subject though that I wanted to get to with you on the script, which was the beginning of the year. The 4070 Ti launched for $800 with really bad reviews. The 4070 then launched for $600 for, I don't know, I call it mediocre reviews. What's really interesting about that one is I remember like a month before launch, I had AIBs with like pricing sheets to partners. Like, so these are the sheets they're giving to Micro Center, and they're saying, this is what it's going to cost to buy a 4070 whatever edition from us, and then you can add your markup. And all of them are over $700. And it seems like at the very last minute, NVIDIA decided to launch the 4070 for far lower than they expected. And then we saw the 4060 Ti, as much as we don't like it, and it got horrible reviews, launched for the same price as a 3060 Ti, and then the 4060 was $300. And it's interesting in that, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but I feel like we've seen Nvidia constantly adjusting more aggressively down the stack in a way that I don't know that we've ever seen them do in the past few generations, like actually responding to bad sales.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they are trying to read the room with this stuff, because, like, you know, I think that's one of the ways in which leaks are really useful for them, is they can see kind of to what extent it generates outrage, and then they can adjust from there. But it's good that they're actually responding to it, because my thought was, considering the like AI boom, that they just wouldn't care at all anymore about the consumer market. But it's nice that they are adjusting it down. Like even on sale for the last couple of months, you've been seeing these GPU prices drop pretty hard. So I think it's cool that they are actually doing that, as opposed to just powering ahead with it anyway.
Yeah, I guess I have a question for you, though. Blackwell should launch end of next year or beginning of 25. Let's just say roughly a year from now.
Okay.
Do you think they're going to take this into account and say, people have spoken, the 80 should be below 1,000, that this should be cheaper than that? Or do you think they're going to try to launch it, most likely, roughly speaking, at the same prices as before? I'm just kind of curious in how you say, seems like they're reading the room finally. Do you think they actually take it to heart or not? I'm just kind of curious what your gut is.
Yeah, I mean, reading the room in as stubbornly as they are willing to as Nvidia. But I think it kind of depends on what happens with like general inflation over the next year. Because it seems like, you know, with all of the rates and stuff going up, prices of stuff is starting to come down again. Like inflation seems to be slowing down, at least. So I think if that's a trend that continues through the year, just for general consumer goods, that may lead to them pricing it better. But if prices drop and then everybody just buys everything up again and everything goes, I think it very much depends on that.
Yeah, it's funny you say that too. I was listening to the podcast Start Here, and just like a morning news podcast. I think it was, I don't know if it was General Mills or one of the cereal mega companies, big cereal. It made the news that that their stock had just plummeted due to falling sales. And everyone is saying it's because, I guess, I don't know exact timing, right? But like a year ago, half a year ago, something like that, they took inflation, and a lot of companies have done this, of course, and they used it as an excuse to pass on the increased cost to customers. And for one quarter, it went well, and then they made record profits. And then the next quarter, like their sales just fell apart as like Magic Spoon and all these online cereal brands started just, well, eating their breakfast, if you will. And I can't help but wonder, like, every company seems to want to do this lately, where they're just like, well, it's inflation, that's why cost has to be 30% more. And you're like, I don't think inflation is 30% higher. I just wonder what the limits of that would be, especially because at a certain point, and I don't know if we talked about this last year, I kind of want to talk to you about it now. Like, I don't know if it matters what the excuse is. I have a suspicion that no one wants an 80 class card above $1,000. It could be whatever performance they say it is, but if it's not the best, people don't want to buy anything with an 8 on it unless it's below $1,000.
Yeah, and I mean that makes sense. Like I feel like I'm still at the point where $700 feels like a lot for an 8 on it when when that started happening. I haven't recovered from that yet, so I don't know when if people will ever get used to that. But I think that, considering that their sales are struggling in this space and they've completely ruined good faith, they're kind of going to have to do it in a way that people are like willing to deal with it. But it'll just be interesting to see what the market will bear at that point. And I think it's very early to gauge. I don't know.
Well, you know, they're launching Super in January. I mean, I think that's going to be when we can gauge it. From what I've been told, like the 4080 Super is single digits better, but, you know, as close to 10% as they can get, say 7 to 9% stronger than the 4080 in raster. And they might actually price it at $1,000. So that's a 20% price cut. Well, technically it would be the 4080 costs 20% more, but a $200 price cut, and it's a little stronger. The 4070 Ti Super, the longest name ever, should be an $800-ish to $900 card.
Wait, are they really calling it the Ti Super? Is that actually happening?
Yes. They actually are. It's in documents. Video cards shared the document. I asked around, and then someone just sent me the briefing document. It says 4070 Ti Super. And it's funny, talking to an Nvidia contact, I kept just calling it the 4070 Ti 16 gigabyte. I'm like, well, based on Nvidia's history, come on, you're calling the 3068 gigabyte? Wouldn't they logically just call this the 4070 Ti 16? And the explanation I got was no, because even though it takes longer to type out, it's quicker to say. Super than 16 gigabyte. So they decided 4070 Ti Super. And yes, that is the plan.
I mean, yeah, that sounds great. Like they need to make up a new naming scheme to add onto it. We need 3 or 4 of them in the next couple generations.
Well, let me look at this though. Let's see this. Because are you ready for how long the actual AIB names will be for this? And I think PNY is one of the worst offenders. Come on, what's the name? Best Buy just cuts it off. That's not fun. They don't show the full name because, what is it? Like the RTX 4090 Elite, whatever, 5, accelerate, the 10 name.
XLR9 ST.
There it is.
They just keep...
I found it in the description. Are you ready for an RTX 4070 Ti Super Accelerate Gaming Verito Epic X RGB triple fan?
Yeah, I can't wait. Oh, you kind of have to buy the card just because of that. Then you have to every time explain to somebody what it's what it's called.
It's very clear that AIBs don't make their own YouTube videos, because if they did, the 100 character limit on YouTube, I mean, this is just a nightmare for us trying to review their products. It's like, what do I even call this? No one's going to see the title.
Yeah, it's like just the name of the card takes up the whole video title. Yeah, it's true.
But I guess my question is, again, overclocked 4080 basically for $1,000. A 16 gigabyte 4070 Ti. I'll be 15% stronger than the 4070 Ti for $800. 4070 Super should just be about the performance actually of a 4070 Ti for maybe $650 or less. And then I hear the 4070 should get a price drop down to $500 or $550. Do you think that's enough? And I guess I'll just jump in. I saw the way you nodded. The 4070 is more interesting, I think.
Yeah.
I think that will sell if they drop it that far. But the 4080 Super at $1,000, I've looked around before we started recording. The 7900 XTX is maintaining its price above 900, like 950. It keeps selling. So I'm curious if AMD just dropped the price of that to $899. Do you think actually $999 is even aggressive enough for the 4080 Super?
I mean, does AMD have the headroom to be able to do that?
Yeah, I don't think they want the 7900 XT to go below 700. They don't want that. That is where it starts getting hard for them. But I do think, I guess the way I would put it is the 7900 XTX, what does it have? Like an extra, I don't know, like $60 of RAM compared to a 6800 XT. And then silicon costs like another $50. So I'd say they'd be happy as long as it's above 850, I'd say. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I can't remember how the performance stacks up between the 4080 and the 7900 XTX, but
it's actually in raster, the 7900 XTX tends to win slightly. So I think the XTX compared to a 4080 Super whatever, you'll be splitting hairs. Same raster, 4080 Super will of course win in ray tracing, but the XTX is 50% more RAM. And if it was 10% cheaper, I don't know. I am wondering, because I could still see myself recommending the AMD one. The 4080 was just so overpriced that I don't know that even $1,000 is enough.
Yeah. And the thing is, the kind of argument that people often make is the feature suite around the Nvidia stuff is what justifies the extra price. But I've been playing around with AMD's Fidelity FX lately, and it's really good. Like it's gotten really, really good, and you don't even need a high-end card with fancy numbers in the name to use it. You can use it on pretty much anything. So I agree with you that 1,000, considering AMD just dropping the price on the XTX, is still going to be a hard sell for it. I am more interested in the 4070 Super though. But if because you're saying less than 650.
I think so. Yeah, the most I could see them charging is 700. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, the most you can see them charging, because
and I think it could just be 600, same price as the 4070 launch price. Right now, the 4070 is below $600 US. Like they've dropped the price to 550. I've seen them for 520. It's not an official price drop, but neither are any of these cards, and all of them are below MSRP even at AMD's website. So
yeah. So the thing is, like, I think with the 7800 XT is like is the official MSRP for that 500, and you can get them for like 550, and that card's faster than the 4070.
Slightly, but yes.
Slightly, yeah. So the Super will be faster than it, but
the Super would probably be 15% faster in raster and a bit better in ray tracing.
Yeah, so then I think that's going to
less RAM.
But less RAM, yeah, and 650 is like a lot more than 5 to 550. It's still quite a difficult price to swallow, considering the AMD alternative.
Yeah, and it's like I just think it kind of, even if most AIBs were to sell it for more than MSRP, I just think it kind of has to be $599 for the same reason the 4080 Super has to be $999 or $999. Yeah, because when I think about it, it's like I've seen people say, oh, there's no way they drop it to 1,000. They have to do 1,100 or something for the 4080 Super. And it's like, no, I think it's the same reason the console manufacturers insist on $499. There's just something about saying it's under 1,000 where it has to be. And I think $599 sounds a little like 500. So I think I agree. I think it's funny talking about this out loud, where it's like, they don't really decide the price until they announce it. But I think they kind of have to do $599 with how strong 7800 XT sales are, because, man, I've seen that thing, and I've seen it both in Europe and the US. This has been reported, but then I've even had just like people, again, I talked to at like a Best Buy or Micro Center, and they're like, can't keep those things in stock. Like half of the graphics cards being bought right now, at least at Micro Center, are like 7800 XTs. Yeah,
and I mean, that's good to see, because it's a really good card. I played around with one like not very long ago, and it's as much card as you need. Like it's such a monster. I think the only reason that you would sway towards like a 4070 is if you really care about efficiency. So earlier in the year, when summer was getting really hot, I made like a very efficient PC, and I used the 4070 in there because I moved from a 3080, which granted is very much not an efficient GPU, but I was getting the same performance as that with like less than half the power draw. And then you can still undervolt it on top of that, and you can game at like 3080 performance with like 140 watts of power draw, like around there. So in that sense, the card it's good to see the price coming down, because that's a pretty cool thing about it. But the 7800 XT is just so much cheaper. Like it's
but so I guess let's say the 4070 Super is 15%, maybe even 20% stronger than the 7800 XT, but it costs 20% more and has less RAM. Which one would you probably recommend to most people?
Oh yeah, the 7800 XT.
You would?
Yeah. But out of curiosity, is there going to be a TDP bump with that extra performance as well, or?
It's out there. Yeah, I think they're. Well, let me double check. Actually, I don't remember.
Okay.
I would make the argument, though, that I don't think it's going to make a huge difference, because I think as long as you're not pushing frame rates past a frame rate cap, they're probably all going to be using close to the same energy with any 4070 card from Lovelace, would be my guess, though.
Okay. Yeah, because that was just in terms of like my apartment heating up while gaming, it made a really big difference.
Oh, I think we talked about that too last episode, where I said, whatever they call the TDP, it has more CUDA cores enabled. It will use more energy than the 4070, most likely.
Yeah.
This piece of content is brought to you by Salad, a computer sharing community that can help you earn back some of that money you've spent on expensive Christmas presents this year. And now, they advise that you at least have an RTX 3060 in your build, but if you do, or you have something stronger than that, you can earn anywhere from $40 to $200 per month depending on your hardware, by lending your computing power to those around the world who love to pay for it to be used in massive computing projects like AI. So when you're not gaming or rendering something for a project, start up the Salad app, become a Salad chef, and cook up some rewards with your gaming PC. Your computer's hard work is rewarded with games, gift cards, gaming hardware, and other pieces of epic loot. And yeah, don't miss out on these free rewards. And honestly, don't miss out on a chance to support Moore's Law is Dead just by clicking on that link in the description and installing the Salad app. Doing that alone helps out the channel a lot. And it also supports a sponsor that's supporting this channel, and it helps you earn rewards while you're not using your PC. Check out Salad today. But you touched on AMD's software features, which wasn't something I really wrote down ahead of time, but it's something I talked about a lot in a couple of my recent videos. So I'm actually curious to talk to you about this. Like, how do you see the feature parity or not parity between AMD and Nvidia right now? And I guess I guess just to kind of frame what I mean by that, like the way I look at it is like DLSS is like a really major selling point. It is. And there's just no way around this. The FSR helps, but DLSS keeps getting better too. And next to that, though, I would say that makes NVIDIA have an overall feature advantage. But when I look at AMD's drivers, it has built-in overclocking. It has Radeon Chill. And it has a menu system that's just like so much easier to use than NVIDIA's. You don't need to log in. That annoyed me again recently on a system I was testing. Like, how much of an edge do you think NVIDIA really has here? Like, I guess, like, yeah, and I'd even put it this way too. Like, if AMD's FSR was as good as DLSS, would AMD clearly have the feature advantage in your opinion?
So, I mean, is it generally agreed that DLSS is way better than FSR still, like currently? Because
go on.
Yeah, because I was just testing a system with like a 1070 in it, and like it was just like an 8-year-old gaming PC to kind of see how it held up. And I was really I had to use FSR, even though it was an Nvidia card, which I can't not find funny every time. But it's holding up so well. Like Cyberpunk's like recent patch kind of brought in a new implementation for that, and even at pretty aggressive settings with FSR, it still looks great, which it didn't do like a year ago. So I think that it's at the point where FSR is kind of good enough. I don't know about the frame generation thing. I'm not a huge fan of that.
Well, I'm not a fan of that in general, but my understanding is that in a couple recent games, it works really well, but in some of them it doesn't. Kind of feels like it's still in beta, and if the developer does a good job, it's comparable, if not better, than DLSS 3 with how it handles the UI elements. But there's been some implementations that have not been good, and who do you blame, the developer or AMD? I don't know. I'd say both, because AMDs should not let them launch bad features, but But yeah, so to answer your question, though, it's funny. I actually talked to somebody at NVIDIA, like, what do you think of FSR the other day? Talked to somebody at AMD and a couple of my other contacts in the industry. And the general gist is everyone thinks AMD needs to improve. The person that I talked to at NVIDIA, surprise, definitely thinks they're ahead of AMD. But, a lot of the opinions I got back was, if you're not pixel counting, it looks pretty close. And if you get off Digital Foundry for a second, it looks fine. And that's kind of my opinion as well, is that as someone who uses a 4090 in their main system, almost always turns on DLSS if it's an option, because I think it works great. But also touches AMD hardware enough to use FSR. Like, my girlfriend's PC uses an AMD graphics card. Okay. I can say that from my perspective, DLSS is obviously better in the extremes, which is to say it doesn't seem worse than native in 4K at all. And in 1080p, it honestly doesn't really seem worse either if you use the highest quality version, whereas FSR, you can notice it. But having said that, FSR, even in like 1440p, as long as it's not one of the lowest settings, it's definitely better than like resolution scaling or like these other ways of getting performance back. And at 4K, I think it looks pretty dang good. And I think it's just there's this internet mindset that FSR is 100 times worse because of all the pixel counting on these YouTube videos. But if you don't pixel count, it's behind DLSS, and in the extremes, DLSS is actually quite a bit ahead. But I don't actually find it in real, like if you were to put two systems next to each other, I don't think someone would say this is the FSR system most of the time. But I'm curious if you think the same thing.
Well, I mean, it used to look like hot garbage. Like a year ago, FSR was terrible. Like so I get why people kind of have this idea that it kind of sucks, because it really did. But I think that with the newer implementations, they're getting there. And even because I was testing at 1080p, and even with like the kind of like performance presets, it was still possible. It was way better than having to deal with the GPU struggling to run the game, you know? So I think that's the part of it that I like the most, is that when you're looking at systems that shouldn't be able to really run the games, these modern games, playably anymore, you can actually use it on them. Whereas with Nvidia, you have to have an RTX GPU, which is likely going to be able to run it at a reasonable resolution anyway. So like, you know, I feel like it makes more sense how AMD implemented it than how Nvidia did in terms of the open sourceness of it.
But so going back to the other question, though, I mean, so do you think AMD's got a better overall software package than Nvidia? Do you think it's like a tie, or what would you say? And know that it doesn't matter what you say. Okay. Half of the people in the comments will be mad, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. You can always count on somebody getting mad over it. But I don't know. I think it depends on the product stack that you're looking at. I think that with like fancier, more expensive hardware, it's maybe a tie. But I haven't played around with those features enough lately to have like an authoritative say on that, or whatever, if I can have an authoritative say on anything. But whereas I kind of like AMD's approach to their software suite more than Nvidia. So yeah, that's a bit of a non-answer, but there you
go. Yeah, you know, I just feel like I think and again, and maybe this just isn't something that you really have an opinion about, but I feel like we saw DLSS 1 come out, and it was completely terrible. It was worse than resolution scaling, which is impressive achievement. Using AI to get that. But at the same time, then FSR 1 comes out, and it was definitely better than DLSS 1 and almost below the worst implementations of DLSS 2. I don't know if that's saying a lot, though. DLSS 1 was terrible. Then DLSS 2 just kept getting better and better and better and better, to the point that when FSR 2 came out, it was like, you're close, but now NVIDIA's just ahead. And what's been so weird is with FSR 3, they've just added the frame generation. And as far as we can tell, it's the same as FSR 2 was in the good implementations. Obviously, some developers maybe lagged in updating it. And then now NVIDIA's got DLSS 3.5, from what I hear. DLSS 4.0 will focus on not more fake frames, but just trying to make the image quality higher and higher, so that if you do turn on either FSR or DLSS, like the ray tracing reconstruction is just so much better on NVIDIA. I'm wondering, like, how far behind, like how much that really affects people. Because something I was thinking about the other day is, I think the biggest issue AMD has isn't that they're like perceived to be behind DLSS with FSR. I think the biggest issue that they have is that it feels like the gap could get wider. Like if you're someone looking to buy a graphics card, you're looking at the 7800 XT, I could see somebody going, and after seeing DLSS 3.5 announced and stuff, and be like, I would be okay with it if AMD was behind, but I knew in 6 months they'd catch up, and I'm always just 6 months behind in this feature that really isn't a big deal. But if it feels like every year NVIDIA is actually going to get more ahead in how good their software works. Am I going to buy this? And then in a year, there's DLSS 4 and AMD's still just like, oh, FSR 2 still. Like, I wonder what you think about that. Like, if you think that could be a bigger issue for AMD, though, if they don't start trying to catch up more in the next year.
Yeah. So, I mean, are they not trying to catch up with it more?
Oh, I'm sure they are. It's just, I don't know. It's just, and maybe this is just the worst month to be talking about it from AMD's perspective. Maybe in 2 months they're going to announce all this new stuff, but it just feels like to me, like right now, it feels like it's a little bit in question.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I actually haven't tested. I should do that. This has really piqued my interest in terms of a direct comparison with like, in a more like high-end use case, testing kind of DLSS versus FSR to see how it feels. And then, because the thing is, like, I think that perception of like, is it behind or not could play a role, but whether that perception is like true or not, for me as somebody who like has the option to test this stuff, I just go like, I'm going to test it and see if I do feel that way. So I think I'm going to do a video on that. That sounds like a really fascinating thing to compare. And like in a more like, not as pixel PP, but just like how does it in a real world? Because with my systems, I don't use DLSS. I game at 1440p and I will lower settings rather than use the DLSS just out of habit. I think maybe it's just because I'm an old man. I don't know, but that's just how I do it. But I should play around with that more.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. You're making me feel like, and this happens sometimes when I talk to a less like trying to predict the future, what are the specs of everything YouTube channel, you make me feel like, is the thing I'm worrying about something that I only see in the deepest depths of the tech arguments online, and like, is it really not as big of a deal as the people arguing about it on Reddit make it out to be? And if that's true, though, they are still doing that. They are still talking about it. Like, what do you think AMD needs to do then to make it? Because it's hard, like, because it's not an argument you want to make. You don't want to be AMD going on stage with RDNA 4 and being like, and it has FSR, which is good enough. Like, that doesn't sound good at an ad. Yeah. Like, how do you think they could? Because I suspect it isn't actually a big deal to most people. Like, anyone again, I brought my girlfriend. She like, and Dan saw her, who is an enthusiast, the co-host of the news episodes of Broken Silicon, saw her gaming on the PC and couldn't tell FSR was on. I think in real world usage, it works very well. But like, I almost wonder, like, is there a feature AMD needs, some other way of portraying it? Like, how do you think they could get away from the perception that it is a big deal? If, again, I've seen other people talk the way you do, a lot of people don't seem to really notice it as a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, they could just be more preemptive with how they bring their roadmap out for what they want to like bring out, to kind of like reassure people that this is something that they're continually working on, and that like, they shouldn't say like, oh, we're behind Nvidia, so like, don't worry, we'll catch up one day. They should just be like, this is a feature that we take seriously and it will develop over time. I think that could help with that kind of argument, or like argumentation of people fighting over that kind of thing. But you never know what people will then how people will respond to that, because there's always a way to get the internet mad about a feature.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I think just transparency about how they feel about or like how they're developing it may help.
Yeah, that's fair, because I do get the perception sometimes that it's just like AMD catches up kind of to DLSS 2, then Nvidia improves it and announces frame generation. Then AMD's like, we are doing frame generation too. And then they're doing reconstruction. And I don't know, maybe it's CES. And this isn't me saying I've heard this, I haven't. But like, AMD comes out and it's like, we have FSR reconstruction. Like, I would say it would be, what AMD needs to do is start coming up with features with FSR that Nvidia is not doing, and then announce the roadmap so that you can say, first, we're doing this thing they don't even do. Then we're adding reconstruction. Then we're doing this. But until they start coming up with their own thing to put on that roadmap, it'd be hard to show the roadmap and not make it feel a little bit like this is how long we'll be behind the competition.
Yeah, maybe that's why they don't have a roadmap, is because they're just waiting to see what Nvidia does before they respond to it. But I mean, is that really that bad? Like, at least they are trying to match the features. At least they may not be innovating, but like it's like the feature will have the thing eventually. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the internet responds to that.
But so I want to move on then to this subject here. One of the big bombshells that came out this year was about how RDNA 4 is canceling its top end, or what was going to be its top end. And I actually had pictures of this elaborate, I think it was like at least 12 chiplet MI300 looking gaming product. And I actually leaked that after it was canceled, because I'm like, well, now it's safe to share. No one's going to get in trouble for showing you guys a canceled product.
Yeah.
But it still sounds like RDNA 4 could be interesting. It seems pretty goddamn confirmed amongst the people I talked to that what AMD is at least trying to do is launch a product. Who knows if it'll be called the 8700 XT or 8800 XT or XTX. But that aims to be about 4080 performance. Certainly better than the 7900 XT is their goal. And they want to launch that, I think, with 16 gigabytes for $400 to $600. So I keep saying that I think the thing that would really make this thing kill it is obviously if they hit the top of their performance goals. But besides that, if they had like an FSR4 ready to go, they had all the things people worry about ready to go, and then they're just like 4080 half the price. Like, I think that could be another Polaris moment, but I think it'd be very important to have that software ready ahead of time. But I'm wondering what you think. Like, does it really not matter if it's half the price of a 4080? Or like, where do you think the price would need to be for it to matter?
I think if they hit that pricing, it would be really good if like a week after launch the graphics cards don't start catching on fire. I think I think that would help a lot. I mean, I know it happens to Nvidia as well, but like it people are very unhappy when that happens. Like I think that kind of reliability thing straight out of the out of the gate is always concerning, because like with the 4090s, they also like there's a lot of fire in the last generation. Actually, it all just caught on fire. But I think if AMD can avoid that like initial drama around some feature being misimplemented, I think that would help a lot in terms of people's trust in the product. And then half the price of a 4080 for the same performance would be a massive cherry on top. That would be really good. They just, that like kind of that screw up a week later shouldn't happen.
Oh, I remember. What are you talking about? The heatsink thing, or
the 7900 XTX? They caught on fire, didn't they? I'm not
remembering this.
I'm pretty sure there was.
I know the 4090 had the power connector thing. And I know, like, in terms of my memory of things catching on fire, there are some really old cards that did. Like, I think from like the GT 7000 series or something. And there was, I know some 1080s did from EVGA. But
so I think it's that there was a vapor chamber issue on the cooler that caused.
Yeah, so they didn't catch on fire. They just, it was like a batch of the first, reference models had not enough coolant in their chamber, which just meant they throttled a ton. So, but yes, stuff like that is stupid. I'll give you that.
From the titles and stuff of YouTube videos covering that, I was sure that they caught on fire. Like I don't know. It's my fault for not like watching the videos and confirming. But like, okay, so that's wrong information there. But still, like that kind of like immediate post launch like issue of reliability with the cards, I think is problematic, because with the 7800 XTX, they didn't have that issue, and the cards are selling really well. So I think, just like Never mind, moot point. We can move on to the next topic.
No, but there's something there though. Like even if they weren't catching on fire, it's like that was a pretty basic quality control thing. It was I don't know what percent it was in the initial batch. I think some say 10% or less, but it's still like, how is this not caught? Anything above 3% should be caught easily, actually, for with quality control. And I think there's just this thing though with AMD where, and I think this is something they should avoid with RDNA 4, where they think they need to get it out as soon as possible, when in reality, it doesn't matter. Just launch it when it's ready. Like when the drivers are ready, when the supporting FSR edition is ready, and when you're sure your coolers work. Like, because ultimately, would it really have mattered if the 7900 XTX launched in Q1 of this year instead of Q4 of last? Like, how would it have I thought they had to get rid of RDNA 2 stock. Good. Get rid of it during the holidays and then launch it. And I think that's something that especially like if you're going to have a pricing advantage, there's no pressure on you. And Nvidia's launching $2,000 graphics cards with this $500 card to launch sooner. When it launches, just make sure it's ready. And I think that's one of the major things they just need to start doing from now on.
No, for sure. Game developers also need to learn that trick. I think that's also something.
A lot of them have, but some still have not.
Yeah.
Let me see here. Bfish writes in and he says, "Hi, Tom and Dawid. You've leaked a lot of info, Tom, on RDNA 4, and it looks like a good product for the market. We've also heard that Nvidia doesn't have new mobile GPUs in 2024. What are you hearing for 2025? Nvidia has to actually give a performance uplift for OEMs to care, right? And will AMD actually release RDNA 4 to laptop in a timely fashion?" Right. So, yeah, I think whatever we have now pretty much for the mobile Lovelace lineup, that's it. But I've heard that the reason Blackwell will definitely launch by early 2025 is because they want to make a big deal about how efficient it is in laptops. And so that's answering one of his questions. But the other part of it is with RDNA 4, I to be honest, I don't have evidence it's really ready to launch sooner rather than later next year. But knowing all of the huge APUs they have coming out that could be paired with these RDNA 4 cards that are meant to be mid-range, I can't help but think if I was AMD, I would want to be getting RDNA 4 out at the same time as those Zen 5 CPUs and laptops, so they can be put in the same laptop. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that, but I would just say maybe one of the reasons they canceled top RDNA 4 is they're like, nothing can slow us down from having this perfect pairing of a GPU. But yeah, I don't know if you have, any thoughts on like the release cadence of RDNA 4 next year, then Blackwell, or like if you're looking forward to next year's laptop stuff.
Well, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed to hear that there isn't going to be laptop GPU revisions from Nvidia, at least. It's like,
doesn't sound like it, no.
Yeah, because it's not like the previous stuff that came out was any good. So that is a bit of a shame. But it would be cool if RDNA 4 could actually make its way into laptops like before the next gen of Nvidia stuff comes out, because I think that AMD has a bit of a rough time in terms of laptop GPUs. I feel like when you look at the laptop market, it's usually there's like 18 variants of laptops with the Nvidia thing in it, and then there's like a couple of them with the AMD one that you like can't find anywhere for sale. So if they can actually get like a new product out while there's this drought of Nvidia products in that space, it may help them get a foothold somewhere where they often struggle.
Yeah, and I think of course I agree. I mean, like I said, I think if they can get RDNA 4 out in time to launch with Zen 5 Strix 12-core APUs, which should be out for back to school next year. Actually, for back to school, not like Meteor Lake was supposedly for back to school in December. But I think they absolutely will. But I wonder, I look at how good Radeon, again, relatively speaking, NVIDIA still sells more cards overall, but relatively speaking, how well Radeon sells in the do-it-yourself space. There's plenty of people online that build PCs with Radeon. But when it comes to laptops, I keep hearing OEMs say that they want an Nvidia sticker on their laptop, and that's why they'll even go through these lengths to put like a 3050 in a 12-inch notebook so they can say it has Nvidia graphics inside of it. And I just wonder, like, I don't know if you have any thoughts on it. Really, I'm not really asking a specific question, but what you think about that as like a headwind to AMD actually implementing RDNA 4 there, because I know that AMD would be worried that anyone would even buy them, though.
Yeah. I mean, so that's why I was saying that, like, if there's a drought going on from the other company, it may give them more of a chance of someone buying it. But if they want to be defeatist about it, they could just be like, no one's going to buy it anyway. So, like, let's not bother, because I think historic trends would really suggest that is a real like there's a real chance of that. Because, yeah, like I don't think I have a single laptop that has an AMD GPU in it, not because I'm biased, just because they're so rare. So it would make sense for them to just not be interested in this space.
Yeah, I guess from that perspective, then too, I have to say, then it's essential that Strix is out before it should be, but like Strix is out before RDNA 4, because if it's already hard for AMD to convince OEMs to use their graphics, they better at least have the argument that you can pair it with their CPU for a discount, or they need as many gimmies as they can get for trying to get laptop GPU market share. And now a quick word from our channel partner, Mint Mobile.
Hey there, it's Ryan Reynolds, owner of Mint Mobile. Enticing, right?
That is enticing, Ryan. Well, please make sure you clean that up in the yard. What a funny neighbor to have out there. Great guy. Yeah. Say hi to Blake for me. I got to do the ad, though, for you. So, anyways, this piece of content is brought to you by Mint Mobile. It's honestly been a very long time since I've looked around at phone plans, but I kind of had to in preparation for this ad. And when I did, I have to admit that some of Mint Mobile's competitors, and I'm not supposed to mention them, but some of them, they just don't want you to see what you're paying for. Like, I actually found it funny that some of them would put like unlimited everywhere and then kind of hide the fact that there were caps on certain types of data and you could only stream 480p video. That's not unlimited, but not Mint Mobile. They tell you what things cost, what you get, and what limitations there are in a very upfront manner. And that's probably because they know they have nothing to hide, and that's really their greatest selling point. You can get a family plan and a family plan, switch to or from a solo plan, and upgrade it mid-month as you need on whatever phone you already own. And yeah, that's the benefit of Mint Mobile. It's great pricing and flexibility to do whatever you want. And you know what? If you click that link in the description and sign up, it actually does help me quite a lot. It helps this channel a ton since I'm partnering with them. And actually, for a limited amount of time, you will get 3 months free of any 3-month plan you buy. So if you go cheap, you'll get 3 months of that free. If you go expensive, you'll get 3 months of that more expensive plan for free as well. So you're not only helping the channel, you're also helping yourself if you go to the link in the description. Support Moore's Law is Dead by signing up for Mint Mobile today. But you know, I guess switching gears to something I think you were excited to talk about too, which is all of the APUs coming out in the next couple of years. We have Hotpoint coming out, well, now basically, but pretty much by February, where, you know, it's just kind of Phoenix Plus. It's got a better AI engine. It's clocked faster, not 2% faster, like decently faster, like, but it's 10% better, basically, besides the AI. We'll see if the efficiency has a big improvement. And then in the middle of next year is when the 12-core, 16 compute unit RDNA 3.5 APU comes out that should be like 3050 performance. And yeah, I don't know if it's 12 Zen 5 cores, it could be actually about as strong as an enthusiast desktop CPU right now. And then Halo comes out in the beginning of 2025 with 40 compute units and 16 cores. It's funny. I've talked to one of the members of the Moore's Law team, Carbon Cry. Like, we might think that AMD is making Halo because this is the way to get laptop GPU adoption, is to force them to buy it with the CPU as a big APU. I'm wondering what you're thinking about these APUs and what you think about that idea that perhaps the point of Halo is literally just to try to force GPU sales in laptop.
I mean, if they can get the price down with it, like if it's, you know, in because it's like an APU as opposed to like a discrete thing, I think it would be a win-win for people, because that thing sounds like a beast. is there going to be a desktop variant of that, or is it only going to be a laptop APU?
Well, so I think the die size for this thing is going to probably be, I mean, at least, yeah, I mean, I think at least 250 to 350 millimeters squared.
Okay.
I think it's over 300, actually. Yeah, if I remember, like 300 to 400 millimeters squared. So that's not going to fit on an AM5 socket. Could fit on a Threadripper socket, maybe. I don't know. But you know, then you'll need a $1,000 motherboard. But yeah, so no, I don't. That won't. Normal Strix will, like that.
Okay.
That'll fit there. And I'm actually curious if you clock that 16 compute unit RDNA 3.5 APU to like 125 watts, like if that could actually perform above a 3050. But you know, still though, if let's say it's around 350 millimeters squared, that's still a combined amount of silicon that's less than most dedicated GPUs with the CPU. So you're still looking at something probably that doesn't need to cost more than the two separate components in a laptop, especially when you consider you can put one heatsink with one fan that pushes air out the laptop. You don't need the double golden thing that, you know, shoves air out two different directions. So that should save on some cost. I do personally think they'll still probably try to charge for it because it'll be like an Apple chip competitor. But, you know, but I answered your question. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
No, I'm just really excited for it. I really like the idea of powerful APUs, and I feel like there aren't enough options in terms of that. Because I feel like we've spoken a bunch in like previous episodes about how a lot of the more budget GPU space is going to get cannibalized by these higher performance APUs, and I feel like it just keeps kind of not happening. So I'm excited to see this doing that more. Yeah, because they're always really fun to play around with.
Beefish writes in, Dawid has done some really great budget builds in the past. I'd love to hear his thoughts on Phoenix for desktop. How excited are you for the 8000G series?
I mean, super excited. Any kind of component like that is always really fun to play around with, because it's the kind of thing that like a lot of people can potentially get access to. I mean, do we have pricing, like, and kind of ballpark for what an 8000G is going to be?
I don't think so. To be honest, it's not something I've really tried to ask about.
Okay.
But I think, yeah, I mean, if I look at, like, 'cause I'm just double checking if there's like anything out there, at least according to something shared by Mo US.
Okay.
It seems like they're suggesting that the 8-core 8700G could be like $350 to $400. It's hard to say because they say $338, but I don't know if they're talking about the price that like Newegg pays before they mark it up. So let's say $320 to $400 for, and just let me make sure I understand the specs correctly. For 12 compute units of RDNA 3. So this is 8 cores. I'm just making sure it was fully enabled and not cut down at all. So let's say it's $350 for the 8700G. I would suspect with decent RAM and like a 95 watt TDP limit, you could probably make this perform like a 1650 or 1650 Ti. Do you think that's cheap enough? Because this is always the problem with APUs is they're kind of too good. Like if you charge less than $350, well, it's probably about as strong as an 8700X, or certainly as strong as an 8600X 6-core. It has 8 cores on 4 nanometer, actually. So I don't know, but still, that would mean you'd get a CPU and a GPU with it. I wonder if you would think that'd be a big deal for budget builds.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that pricing puts it quite high up in terms of like if you're really trying to do a budget build, because. Yeah, like then you're getting to the point where you could start looking at used GPUs, and then it like, I don't know. At that price point, I feel like it's a little too expensive for that kind of thing. But it is a really powerful chip, you know. So it's difficult. I guess I have to see the performance,
because you're getting the performance of like an 7600X at least.
Okay,
that's a $200 CPU, and then you're getting the GPU on board for $150. So it's like but it's like I think it's always hard for AMD to decide what they're going to charge for what is an 8-core on 4 nanometer that's probably as good as their already $300 8-core. Like if they charge less than 300, why would, like, from their perspective, they could be arguing, but you're basically getting a 7700X and then you're getting a graphics card with it for an extra $50.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, that's fair. I guess for like budget builds, a lower core count version of that. So is it just going to be an 8-core, or are we also going to get like a 6-core?
There is one 6-core, but again, and I haven't asked about it, so
okay,
don't shoot me, people, if I'm just quoting a person who doesn't know what they're talking about here.
Okay.
But if there's a 6-core with 12 compute units for like $200, I think that's far more interesting to you.
Yeah, because like the 8-core version of it, that's a beast. Like I don't know in terms of a 6-core one would be really cool.
Yeah, because I know that the other ones they have, there's going to be a 6-core with 4 compute units. Who cares? And a 4-core with 4 compute units. I think 4 compute units we don't really care about that much. That's like no performance. So, but I guess I actually I want to shift to a different conversation here that's kind of tangential to this.
Okay.
We've talked about so far graphics cards like the 4070, which has started to sell well recently, but all of these cards have had a rocky start to the year in sales. But at least as far as I can tell, the 3050 and especially the RX 6600 and the 3060 12GB are selling like crazy right now because they're well below MSRP. Like the 6600's 200. You can sometimes find 3060 12GB for 250 around here. But at the same time, a lot of these cards and the newer ones like the 7600 only have 8GB. So I'm wondering how you feel about these sub $200 cards that are just flooding the market right now. But then also about the 8GB thing. It's something no one's talked about for a few months, I think, but that was a huge thing for a lot of the year is people realizing that there's a real issue running high-end graphics now with just 8GB of RAM.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it makes complete sense that the sub $200 cards are flooding the market because that's the price point people like buying cards at, I think. And it's been a long time since there has been such a like a whole bunch of new cards available there that you're not just looking at like an RX 580 and so it makes complete sense that I think that kind of part of the market has been starved quite long. And
that's true for people waiting for that. Now that segment is buying, and they were probably waiting for 2 years for these to show up at that price.
Yeah. So I think it's really good that they're getting those cards for that price. And I think at that price, 8 gigs of video memory isn't ideal because, like the RX 480 had 8 gigs ages ago. It would have been nice getting more video memory, but I think that at least there's newer cards available there is kind of what people are thinking in terms of that. And that's like why a lot of people are buying it up. And it's also like in terms of higher like texture settings and stuff that the memory starts becoming an issue. It's at like ultra settings and stuff that you start running into that bottleneck really hard, which I think the cheaper cards, it's maybe a bit less of an issue, like less of a concern, at least.
No, I entirely agree. Like, my channel made a huge deal about the 8GB issue. I'm trying to remember what even one of the first games was. I mean,
The Last of Us was
The Last of Us was like the third one, and that was the worst one. But there were other ones too, like Harry Potter. They wanted like at least 12GB. That was a big one. It was a popular game, so that was an issue that a lot of people experienced. But I remember at the beginning of this year, there were so many people saying, "Oh, this one game, that was a Callisto Protocol." I know the Star Wars one was one of them too, the Jedi one. And they were like, "This is a huge issue." But it's just the dev. The dev's lazy, and then another game came out, and then another game came out, and then another game came out. It was like 5 games in a row where 8GB cards were struggling, not just in 4K, but sometimes in 1440p. And then this channel had on, what did I had a Unreal Engine 5, Infinity Ward, and another developer as well. And all of them said, no, 8 gigabyte cards are going to have issues moving forward. Like we've been bending over backwards to try to fit all of these textures in the 1070. And then when we saw the 3070, we're like, are you kidding me? You're killing me here. But at the same time, I feel like some people have blown that point I made out of proportion, going, well, he's saying everything needs to be 24 gigabytes. And I'm like, no, it's not high end anymore.
Yeah.
I think 8 gigabyte cards in 1080p is going to be supported for a very long time.
Yeah. I mean, one of the people on my Discord had a 3070 that they modded 16 gigs of RAM onto, like video memory.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah, and I really struggled to get it to make a difference. I really struggled. So I don't know if that's like a driver issue, that it just didn't want to allocate more video memory to the card because it thinks it should just have 8 gigs. I don't know. But
there's a chance of that. I know some people have tested it, or at least Hardware Unboxed did a test with the A4000, which is just, it's like a professional card, but it's like a 16 gigabyte 3070.
Yeah.
And they found scenarios where it could just catch up to the RX 6800 all of a sudden, because it had more memory. So, it just depends, but it does still depend on the game. Like, I think we have to remember that games have now they're like 5-year development cycles, not even just 3 or 4 year. And so any game, half of the games coming out now were probably designed around 3-year-old hardware. But I do think it is going to be an increasingly larger problem, though. But again, only if you're someone trying to game in 4K with like 10 gigabytes on Ultra or 1440p on Ultra with 8 gigabytes. Like, if you accept that 8 gigabytes isn't high end, I don't know that it's that big of an issue, actually.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree that like a card like a 4070 definitely, I think that they, like Nvidia does tend to put too little video memory on their cards, like definitely. And that's something that they should stop doing because it does affect the longevity of the products, because people hold on to graphics cards, and if you buy like a $500 or $600 graphics card now and you're not going to be able to play like higher end games later with it, it's going to suck because it's an expensive thing that you bought and it should have more longevity than the video memory is going to allow for.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing too, because I think that's one of the things that accelerated RDNA 3 sales in the second half of this year. Is NVIDIA's in a pretty dominant position right now, but man, they gave the 4060 Ti 8 gigabytes. They gave an $800 4070 Ti only 12 gigabytes. And then AMD was just like 24, 20, 16. And I think that in hindsight, and actually they have, some people I talked to at NVIDIA have admitted this, like they probably should have taken the VRAM thing much more seriously. And I think that kind of bailed out half of the concerns about AMD's RDNA 3 performance, simply because, again, going back to the 4080 Super, yeah, maybe they'll take $200 off the price. Maybe they'll make it stronger. But if it's $1,000 and there's a cheaper AMD card with 50% more RAM, this is the generation where that matters so much.
Yeah, at that price point, it really matters, and they need to stop cheaping out with that. I don't know why they keep doing that.
I actually have a suspicion that one of the things that might dictate when Blackwell comes out, especially mid-range Blackwell, is when higher capacity memory chips are available, so they can make up for the fact that, at least I've heard, some of their mid-range cards may still be 128-bit next gen, and some of their high-end may still be 192-bit. And they to a certain extent, they can't add more RAM until they make higher density GDDR7 or GDDR6X. And until they do that, I told someone at NVIDIA, well, then don't launch it. Like, if the 5060 is 8 gigabytes, don't launch it until you have the density to give it 12 or something, because I just think that's absurd.
Yeah, and like, why not put a bigger memory bus on it? Like, is that is that not an option? I don't understand.
Yeah, I know. Like, why not at least make it like 160-bit so it is 10 gigabytes or something? I don't know. Like, I think that only adds like 10 to 20 millimeters squared to the die. But, with how small they're making their mid-range cards now, I guess that might be 10% of the die size. But I don't know. That's not much. I think that's like a no-brainer too.
Yeah.
One exception though to the rule of prices going down in the end of this year was the RTX 4090. And I do have to remind people that at the beginning of this year, the 4090 was dropping below MSRP. You were starting to see deals for $1,500 ones. They were starting to pile up in stock. And then the AI boom just happened and it's gone. And, and in fact, Nvidia cut production to make more AI cards. So I'm just kind of curious, how you feel about watching the 4090 like have massive sales, then having them again for AI, especially after going from the end of a mining boom to an AI boom.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I didn't notice.
Because you're not buying that anyways, right?
No, I wasn't paying attention to that, but it's good to me that I could not notice that thing happening, because like the fact that it's the 4090 is kind of great for consumers, that it's the really high power stuff that AI is kind of interested in, because like that's such a high price point for a card. Like the 4090 is a really good graphics card. It's awesome. But it costs so much money. And yeah, I think that if that's how like the AI boom goes forward in terms of like cannibalizing the GPU space, that it just kind of eats the top off it, I don't think that's that bad, to be honest. Like it's way worse than the mining boom, which was just all of it. Like you couldn't even buy a 1030 anymore. So yeah, that's
you could buy a 1030 and it was $200.
yeah. Whoa,
but
crazy times.
I do wonder though, next gen, like how much this is like, is this though going to become this thing though where Nvidia knows people who want AI will pay through the nose for more than 24 gigabytes and 24 or higher, and because of that though they continue to refuse to give more RAM to the mid-range. Whereas AMD, who would like all the AI sales they can get, they're like, who cares? Everything gets 16 gigabytes. Buy our cards, please. But Nvidia's like, no, we want you to buy the 5090 for AI, and therefore the 5070 still is 12 gigabytes. I don't know. That's the one thing that worries me about this, is that Nvidia may calculate we should continue to skimp on VRAM though. But I don't know if they can though with all these games coming out.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think if they do that, gamers aren't going to buy them either. Like, it's not just going to be my AI people that won't buy them. I think that, this, as AMD's kind of like sales seem to be suggesting, like it really does matter, and they they need to wake up to that. Otherwise, it's going to be tough for them.
I'm curious how you think about this. Like, let's hypothetically, right? Let's just say, boilerplate increase here. Let's say Blackwell's 50% faster than Lovelace, and they launch a 5090, 24, that's 24 or 32 gigabyte for like 1,800. Then they launch a 5080. It's stronger than the 4090 for $1,000. Then they launch a 5070 for like, I don't know, $700. That's above a 4080 Super. 5060 for $450. That's about a 4070 in performance, and so on and so forth down the stock. So it's better, but it's not cheap. And then AMD comes out and they match, let's say they're just below the 5070 that's $700, but their card is like $500 with 16 gigabytes. How effective do you think it would be to make a 32 gigabyte version that's like clocked 5% faster, that they then sell for like 600 or even the same price? Like, I'm wondering how much you like if Nvidia had a 12 gigabyte card for 700, and hey, it's stronger than a 4080 Super. Thing ain't weak. If it was out now, this is all people would be buying, but it's 2024. 5070 is 12 gigabytes for 700, but really strong. If AMD had a card 10% weaker, but with 32 gigabytes of RAM for the same price, do you think that'd probably be enough to just sway people to that?
I wonder. I guess it depends on what kind of games come out in 2024. If there's like a game that comes out that people are like, whoa, 16 gigs is starting to look a little rough, then yeah, maybe it would be enough to get people to do that.
What percentage of people do you think that would just buy it because it's the bigger number? I'm curious what you think.
I think there are definitely people that would do that.
We're talking 32 versus 12, 3 times the RAM almost.
Yeah, that is a big number of RAM. That's a real EP in RAM amount. I think it, like if their like bus size can accommodate it, like it'll be interesting to see how the market reacts to it. Because yeah, I'd buy one. I don't know. That's
just to say you have a 32 gigabyte card. Yeah, I don't know. I probably would too. That'd be yeah, because that was one thing that was always funny. I got a Radeon 7. Number one, I got the red edition because that's my favorite color. So I have to admit, it was my favorite color. But number two, I mean, I was really getting it for editing videos, and it was really good at that at the time. Happened to end up paying for itself through mining times 10 because someone on eBay was wanting to pay me way too much for that thing I sold during the mining boom. But it was always fun to say I had 16 gigabytes of HBM a few years ago when everyone else had 8 gigabyte cards.
Yeah, and it was HBM as well. That's also that's a really big thing. Yeah. No, I think that's a cool trump card for them to play because they know Nvidia is too cheap to do it. Yeah, that'll be real exciting if we get it.
They do that. Yeah. It's not like I've heard they have. XTX 999 writes, and it says, curious to see if you know when 4090s will return and be in stock, and will they be $3,000 like they are now? No, I mean, and by the way, what he's referencing, I've answered this before, but I'll answer it again for him. Like, they banned the 4090 in China, but they banned it starting November 17th. So what happened is every AIB was like, wait, we have 1 month where it's not banned, but everyone knows it will be banned. All stock was just shipped to China for the year. And then they and anything that didn't get there on time, I was told they smuggled through Singapore and Taiwan. I mean, not Taiwan, Hong Kong. Okay. And so one quote I heard from an AIB was, we've made more money on 4090s this year by the end of November than we expected to for the by the end of the year. So we're just done. We've sold all of them. They're gone. I mean, what I'm told is that they're making more, but they're not going to get here until, like April or March or something. And that's why I think they're rushing out the Super so quickly as well, as they realize that AMD has high-end sales that are going well. They won't have any 4090s for a while, so might as well move the stickers down a tier and call it a different card to sell them.
Yeah. I mean, we're at Blackwell. We're looking at early 2024, right? So there is.
Super should be beginning of 2024. Blackwell should be, I think, November next year or something.
November next year.
Between November and February, in that time frame there, depending on how sales are going, if they feel the need to launch earlier or not.
Okay, so those 4090s that come in April are still very much going to have a market for for the rest of the year to sell to.
I don't think it will be like the 3090 Ti. I can remember a month before Lovelace and dropped in price overnight in half, which is hilarious.
Yeah, that was also a weird card launch.
But let me see here. Chris Rich writes, he says, hi, Tom. Earlier in the year, you would often talk about Nvidia's huge stockpile of unsold GPUs. Has the situation changed much at all recently? Well, define recently. It's pretty obvious they're not selling new 3080s anymore. But what I've heard is that these 3050s below 200 and these 3060s below 300 prepare for years of over-manufactured 3060s that are just going to continue to be pushed into the market. So, yeah, I mean, nothing's changed except that there's just still a ton of these low-end cards. Got any 2024 New Year's resolutions? Well, my girlfriend's cat does, trying to jump around in as much loose wrapping paper as he can. And my dog Jessie, well, her New Year's resolution is to watch him do that as much as possible for some reason. But for many of us humans, New Year's resolutions usually involve trying to learn a new skill or improve our health while staying happy. And, well, Vite Ramen can help you do that last one. This piece of content is brought to you by Vite Ramen. Vite Ramen is a healthy, tasty, and shelf-stable food crafted by an American startup that offers tons of options for eating healthy, like their classic packages that make it easy to add protein and other ingredients of your choice, or also their Ramen Go packages that offer a healthy, microwavable option for those who truly only have a 15-minute lunch break, or their new Nano Boost Vitality Powder that I honestly think tastes fantastic and is a great way to get a tasty burst of energy later in the day without cranking yourself up on that third or fourth or fifth, really, cup of coffee that you know you shouldn't be drinking if you want to go to bed at a reasonable time. Seriously, their Vitality Powder, it actually does taste very, very good. I've been enjoying it quite a bit. And for all of their products, whether it's kitchenware, powders, or their ramen, of course, click on the link in the description and use the offer code BrokenSilicon to save 10% on all of their fantastic products. They really are a great, rapidly growing American startup that's been very good to the Moore's Law is Dead team over the past few years. And well, due to us actually liking their products and liking them, they've been good to us. So supporting them supports me. And even just clicking on the link in the description makes a big difference as well. But I really do like their products and recommend them. So check out Vite Ramen today. You know, and that actually gets me to another subject, though. I saw that you reviewed the A380 recently. Now, unfortunately, it seems like you reviewed it like the month before the real Intel driver update. I actually watched that video of yours where you said, it feels like in my feed, I'm seeing Intel announce a new 1000% boost driver every 2 weeks, which can't be true because if it went up by that much, it'd be stronger than a 4090 by now, right? But when the A580 came out, it did work, I found. Like, I actually tested it and I was like, and I know this is so pathetic, this is the bar we're at with ARC, but I was like, all my games start. You know, and all of them actually can run at least in 1080p. Like, because man, there were some games where even an A770, I couldn't get to run Battlefield like even at 1080p well, even if it could boot up. But I'm curious, you know, so it's unfortunate you didn't test the A380 to my knowledge until and after the recent driver update that seemed to be the real one. Okay, but I'm wondering how you feel about ARC, especially in the face of like what I just said. I think there's going to be $200 6600s for the next 2 years. And when those sell out, I think the 7600 is going to become $200. And the 3050s and 3060s, I don't think Nvidia has any shortage of shoving those things at bargain prices. Doesn't that almost make it impossible for any of these ARC cards to sell as long as like a 3060 is almost 200 or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I looked at the Intel GPUs like way earlier this year because there was a point where I lived with like a 780. Was it the 780? 770. I lived with a 770 for like a month, and aside from a really like dumb modded game, everything ran quite well on it in terms of like the driver stuff worked quite well.
Like it worked. Yeah.
It worked. Yeah. But yeah, with the like new drops in prices and stuff, it has become quite difficult for them to compete in a space where they used to be way cheaper than the competition. But so what is like a 770 going for at the moment?
Let's see. You know, I actually haven't checked recently.
Yeah, so you can get one for like, oh, they're not available.
Where you are?
Yeah, there's one open box of the A750.
So in America and on Newegg, the A770, there are 16 gigabyte models for as low as 280. Which sounds pretty good, but again, every time it's dropped in price. So 280 for an A770 16 gigabyte from ASRock, right? Or for the same price, I can get a 3060 12 gigabyte. I think I know what I would at least recommend to a family member that I don't want to have them call me if something goes wrong.
Yeah, I think you have to be an enthusiast and like know how to diagnose a PC and stuff to get into a GPU like the A770 or any of the Intel stuff. I think that it's not the kind of GPU you recommend to someone. It's the kind of GPU that you as a person choose to get, if that makes sense.
I know, but I can assure you Intel's marketing team doesn't like hearing you say what the way you paint it in a good light. Well, Alchemist is the card you don't recommend.
Yeah, you don't recommend it, but you know, if you like a
but
challenge,
you buy it maybe.
Yeah. Like I think that there is, from what I could tell, there seems to be a little bit of a cult following of the Intel GPUs, people who bought them when they were like a cheaper alternative, which now it kind of depends, who were very happy with their GPUs. Like the comment section in that video where I lived with one for a while, people Like a lot of people who owned ones seemed very happy with them. So yeah, well, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful though, because I don't know if you're how active you were like on Tom's Hardware forums or Reddit or something a decade ago, but there were a lot of people that insisted Bulldozer was real good though, and that they were so happy they bought it still, and they're like, "Oh, thanks for saying something good about Pile Driver."
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I guess it depends. I wonder how those people feel about it now. That yeah.
I mean, the way I would look, I look at Alchemist and Arc overall is it's like, so a year later it works. It does work. I will say that I didn't just test the A770 though. I benchmarked it against like an Arc 6700, which costs about the same, if not sometimes cheaper. And then an RTX 3050, which is usually cheaper but should be weaker. And I honestly found like the A770 is only like 20 to 30% stronger. And there were games where it was so weird. It's like in a game, either it's a 6700 XT, a 6600, or it's a 3050. There's no in between. Yeah. The game just is this or this or this. And so it was so weird. Like, for example, Battlefield. I had a whole saga with something go wrong a couple of years ago with the 3090, so I had a 3050 as a backup card. And for a while, I played Battlefield 2042 in 1440p with DLSS, and it ran at about 1440p medium settings, 100 hertz, which is enough to still definitely have fun playing the game. And so when I tested the A770, it went from not really being able to boot up the game to I was like, oh, I'm playing in 1440p now. But then I was like, wait, isn't that what I did on a 3050 though? Like, is that really? So I don't know. It's like, I think you have to compare it to the other cards though, because if you don't, all right, they've cleared the threshold of booting up the game. But
yeah, that's like an infinite improvement in performance because it goes from not running to running. That's
where that 10,000% increase comes from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
but I'm wondering how you feel about kind of the future of Arc at this point, because some people claim some Alchemist Plus generation was coming out this year. Well, unless it launches in the next week, it's not coming out. And Meteor Lake's GPU performance kind of seems all over the place too. And that is Alchemist Plus, but a tile version of it. Like, yeah. How are you feeling about them right now? It's been a year of it being out.
I mean, didn't they officially give up on it? Aren't they just like done with their discrete GPU space?
Well, not officially. They killed the graphics division, and then they said it isn't killed. And then they fired Raja Kadori, and Ryan Shrout left the company, whatever that means. So I don't know. It's not looking good, but they still claim they totally have something coming out. What I hear is maybe like some mid-range thing for a laptop, end of 2024. My personal opinion is stop trying to launch a full generation. Launch one card, make it work, and then when you have the money and the good drivers, that's when you do a full stack. That's my opinion. But well, I mean, I think I got your answer. I think you said from your perspective, there isn't really Arc anymore.
Yeah. I thought Arc was dead. I was under the impression that like it was, they're using it for their iGPUs, and that's kind of the extent of it. Which
effectively that's what I think's going on, basically. Yeah. But until we see something else, but even the A580 took a year to come out. That was so weird.
It was really weird. Yeah. I mean, that was halfway through this year that it
was. I remember because I was on vacation when it happened. It was in October.
It was in October. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's so weird.
All right. Well, let's switch from graphics though to CPU, because I'm curious about your thoughts on a couple other developments this year, which is, it's kind of very open-ended. How do you feel about CPU competition going into the end of this year? And apparently the 7800X 3D and Zen 3 are still just the only thing people are buying comparatively.
I mean, it makes sense. Like the 14th gen was just 13th gen, but again, and 13th gen was just 12th gen, but again. So I don't know. It makes complete sense. People are buying these AMD GPUs because they're just so epic. Like they're real fast. So I have not actually used the 7800X 3D yet. It was the 7950X 3D, and it was that where it was like, I was one of the people that was like annoyed about the 7800X3D coming out because it's like the better gaming chip for way less money than the 7950X3D, like after it's been purchased. But yeah, I think that those CPUs are really awesome. I have a question though. Has the 5600X3D, is that available now from places that isn't Micro Center, or is it still?
You mean this?
Is that from Micro Center?
Yeah.
Like, where did you?
Yeah, no, this was I helped Steve at Hardware Unboxed get a 5600X3D since he's in Australia, and had one. He got one for me as well that I still need to test, but I have no time to do anything ever because there's too many things to do. I can't really see it, but yeah. But I have one. No, I think their solution to it is just going to be, my understanding is this CPU, the 5600X3D, is going to remain Micro Center exclusive, but they're going to launch a 5500X3D that is this in all but name, so they can sell a cheaper version everywhere else. I don't remember when that's supposed to come out, probably in the next couple of months.
That'll be cool, because I think that AM4, it's had pretty good death throws. Like the 5800X3D's also been, I think giving like more affordable options for that platform makes a lot of sense, because people who don't want to upgrade to AM5 would do so because of budget constraints. So something like a 5500X3D would, I think, sell gangbusters. I think they'd sell huge amounts of that.
Gangbusters. That's a word I say all the time.
Oh, do you say that all the time? People make
fun of me for saying, yeah.
Oh, I heard a streamer I watched recently said it, and I don't know, it just popped in my
Do you know where that streamer lives? I think it's a Midwestern, Northern United States thing to say it a lot. Obviously, it's a term that everyone seems to understand, but I've noticed in the Midwest, which is where I'm from, people say it a lot. It wouldn't surprise me if they say it a lot in Canada too, though, because they kind of blend into each other, if we're being honest.
Yeah. I don't know where the person's from. I can't even remember who the person is that I'm thinking of. I just remember hearing it recently. I mean, maybe it was you. Maybe I heard you say gangbusters, and now I'm just like parroting.
If you listen to anything I've said, any video, I've probably said it at least once per 2-hour podcast. So
no. Then you're the streamer I'm thinking of.
But what was I gonna say? Yeah, it's funny when Alder Lake came out, which I really, really liked Alder Lake. But I mostly liked it for enthusiasts. I saw people go, well, what is, and same thing with Zen 4, actually. People said whether it was during Alder Lake's, I'm sorry, I should say during Raptor Lake, actually, I confused them. Like when Raptor Lake was launching against Zen 4, people said, well, what is AMD going to do about DDR4 support? And I was like, they have it. It's right here. You go get Zen 3 if you want DDR4 support, and the motherboard's cheaper too. But it is interesting to see like how many people said that was such a big deal. But at the end of the day, I don't think AMD cares if most of their sales are Zen 3. That's a good problem to have.
No, for sure. And I think that platform does what it needs to do. So like them going on to the next kind of like space with AM5 makes a lot of sense, considering how long they want the sockets to survive as well. It's not like Zen 5 is going to be or AM5, sorry, is going to be like 1 or 2 generations and then it disappears. So yeah, no, I agree with you.
I'm curious, what would you recommend people buy right now if they were just doing a standard $1,000 gaming PC? Like what would be the CPU and platform?
I just off the top of my head wouldn't have a recommendation. I'd have to go Google it and research a bit first. So I haven't looked at it like recently, because there was a while where there was like RX 6600 and like 12400 combination was a very good price to performance combo. That was like earlier in this year, and that stayed the case for a while, and then I kind of lost interest and then haven't looked at it since. So that's my answer.
I guess I have a question I want to throw at you. How would you feel about Zen 5? Let's say they still stay a little aggressive on pricing. Let's say they do like $600 or $700, let's be honest, for 16 cores. And assume Zen 5's like 20 to 30% better than now overall. I think that's about what we're going to look like. So a standard generational uplift, but it's like, I don't know, $650 for 16 cores, $500 for 12 cores, $400, or maybe, $400 for X3D 8 cores, 330 for 8 cores, 250 for 6 cores, like your standard lineup here.
Mhm.
Would that sound great to you, or do you have any problem with them not increasing core counts? Because it doesn't, they could, I'm told, but it sounds like they don't want to use the expensive 16 core chiplets unless they have to, and they don't feel like they have to, at least at first. So do you think it's a big deal they're stopping at 16 cores still, most likely?
I mean, I don't, like, for my personal usage, I don't think so. I don't know how much demand there is for core count above that, because it's that kind of thing where it's not the kind of thing like with 8 gigs of video memory going up in the higher end that is like a huge problem. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that at this point they don't have to push that hard because Intel isn't pushing that hard. So,
and it's interesting, you said 12400F, right? So that's the i5 without E-cores. You don't even want the i5 with E-cores, it sounds like.
Well, there was a period where, because of how the pricing structure was along kind of all of the CPUs that were out, that was just like a good one that was available. Because I think it was after 13th gen came out, the 12400F was like really cheap. You could get it for like not very much. But yeah, I mean, for gaming, because I see with like the new stuff, they keep adding efficiency cores to like Intel.
Yeah, and I was just pulling up best CPU sellers on Amazon, at least in the United States right now. And it's just so funny. I'm wondering, like, I had James Pryor on. He's someone who used to be a product manager at AMD, and he's one of the people that helped segment and market Threadripper. Like, he's part of the people that said, let's call it Threadripper, you know?
Okay.
And I asked him what he thought about some people in the community being annoyed that 8 cores aren't cheaper on AMD yet. They're getting there, but like, I think there will be a lot of people, at least in the comments section, that will be mad if AMD announces the, I don't know, right, 8700X, and it's not 250, but it's 350. Like, why wouldn't you call it the 8600? Why are we still doing 6 cores? Why can't you give us 8 cores below 300? And I said, do you think AMD should increase core counts? And he said, wouldn't it just be better to launch an 8600 X3D for 300 or something? And I was like, oh. And I'm curious what your thoughts were. Would you rather have an 8-core Zen 5 for 300 or a 6-core with Vcache for 300?
I'd probably, I mean, okay, so it depends on the use case, but for gaming, I'd go the 6-core kind of X3D thing, because that makes such a big difference to kind of like CPU performance in gaming.
And I don't know how Intel would compete with that at the $300 price point. Certainly not in gaming, you know.
Yeah, because I think that, I mean, how much is 8 cores like being used in games? Like, is there a massive demand for that?
I mean, it is, but I'm sure the cache would help more in the short term, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like half of the games want 8 cores. And then of those half that want 8 cores, I'd say a fourth of them benefit a little bit by having more than 8. And then I'd say just half a game straight up don't really need more than 12 threads, you know?
Okay. And then, but the X3D, like that cache makes a big difference, like everywhere. Like it's a big deal. Yeah, I think he's clearly smart. he clearly.
I know. I wish AMD would rehire him. But here's another interesting thing that I've noticed recently too. When I look at the best sellers in CPU right now on Amazon, at least as of when we are recording, number one is the 7800X 3D. Then it's 3 Zen 3 chips, and then there's one i7, then the 5800X 3D, 5600. An i7 and i5, and then it's just Zen 3 and then another i5. So AMD's clearly outselling Intel here, at least in the do-it-yourself market, by quite a lot. But what's also interesting to note here is the top-selling Intel chips that I'm seeing here are the i7 12700KF, the i7 13700K, and the i5 12600K. Two of the top-selling Intel chips only have 4 E-cores. And then there's this 12600KF too. So 3 out of the top 4 selling Intel products have only 4 E-cores. Like, and it makes you start to question, like, so wait, no one's paying any premium for these E-cores. They're only buying it based on the amount of P-cores, when the top selling Intel chips are the minimum E-core models. You know, and I think I'm wondering how you think about how like the E-core thing is playing out right now, because at least in the do-it-yourself space, it seems very clear that people they'll take the extra E-cores if you'll give it to them for free. But that's basically it. They want the extra E-cores for free, and they're basing their decisions on P-core to P-core, and then that's basically it.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't the whole like E-core gambit for mainly targeted towards laptops anyway, or is it not? Is that not how Intel thinks about it? Because
that's what most people would argue, including Intel occasionally.
Okay.
Is that the reason you have these E-cores is for like efficiency and such, but when I look at the power consumption of Intel chips, I'm not seeing this efficiency that they're saying these E-cores should be giving them. And I think it's worth pointing out the E-core efficiency, like for responsiveness in Windows, which Windows is a very heavy operating system. This is not a low-level one. If you were to send the first task to the E-core, it would be sluggish because it's slower. So they always send, like if you're browsing the web, you're at like 10% CPU usage. It's sending the task to the P-cores before the E-cores. Right. So how is it saving energy? It's sending them to the P-cores first. Right. The whole idea of E-cores on phones is use the P-cores only when you need to. That's the opposite of what they're doing. So I would make the argument that the E-cores are there to win Cinebench. I don't know. Like, I mean, because they give you more multi-threading performance for the amount of die space you have. You can fit 4 E-cores in the same space of 1 P-core. So, and 4 E-cores versus 1 P-core, I think performs like 30% better in multi-threading or 50%. So to me, it's like just allowing you to have more multi-threading when you need it. Doesn't really seem to be an efficiency thing.
Yeah, so I guess the main reason they have it is so that the core number at the end of the CPU is higher, and then they hope that tricks someone into buying it because they think it's better. Like maybe that's the real thinking behind the whole E-core thing, because then you can say it's like a 40-core CPU or whatever, because most of them are like those little baby loser cores.
Well, it's funny though, because they're as strong as Skylake, so they're not like garbage cores, but at the same time, as long as you have at least 6 cores with hyperthreading, what task is using more than that usually? And I think that's what it comes down to. Is I think a lot of people are fun, and it's so funny because it almost sounds like an Intel argument from yesteryear, but like the real world usage benchmarks, like the E-cores seem very, very bad at that. Well, let me do just a general Intel question here. Chris Rich writes in and he says, how would you summarize Intel's year? To me, it feels like it was one of their worst ever. Financially, they've done badly and had to lay off many engineers, and their new products have been poor. So what I'm feeling for Intel right now is mostly pity, mitigated by it being largely self-inflicted. It's pretty harsh. Let's hope that 2024 is better for them, as it's not fun like this. And so I'm just curious, like how you feel. Like you already kind of said, Raptor Lake was Alder Lake again, and Raptor Lake Refresh was Raptor Lake again. Meteor Lake, I mean, it's an improvement, but it doesn't really seem to leapfrog AMD's stuff they launched 8 months ago. How are you feeling? And by the way, from what I'm hearing, Arrow Lake comes out like December next year. So Zen 5's launching in like... Honestly, I wonder if they'll push back Zen 5 because they don't need to launch it. But Zen 5 should launch in the first half of next year, let's say. And then Arrow Lake might not be out for at least half a year. Like, how are you feeling about Intel right now? I
mean, is Arrow Lake also going to just be 12th gen, but again? Or is it...
This one is a real new one.
This is a real new one. Okay.
I think it's going to be minimum 30% faster. Okay. But Zen 5's also... It's going to be better too, though.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, right, like, it's... Part of me thinks it's really funny that Intel is getting shafted in the way that they are, because they really did stunt like CPU development for a long time because of how they handled their monopoly. But the thing is, like, if AMD becomes the new monopoly, that's gonna there needs to be good competition. So on the one hand, it's funny, but on the other hand, I also kind of feel bad for them because. Yeah, like there needs to be a competitive market for the products to like keep going forward, Yeah.
But so I'd say the one saving grace is at least Apple is making their own chips now. At least Qualcomm's about to launch a laptop chip, and
That's
least Nvidia probably will, I would guess, within 5 years. Like, so
do a CPU? Are they planning on?
I've always heard they're planning on it, and there's more smoke coming to this fire recently. Now, what does that mean? No, I don't think next year you're going to go buy an Nvidia. What would they call it? RTX 9? I don't know what they would call it, but yeah, I don't know what they would call it. Who knows? But I mean, I think they'll probably start dabbling in this soon. I don't think it's like we're going to be doing benchmarks of 32 core Zen 6 against them probably, though, in a couple of years. I think it's going to take some time. Could be wrong. And I'd also guess that it'd probably first be like laptop chips for Surface, if I had to guess. But yeah, I think they might eventually. I think that's the one thing, though, stopping AMD from going completely stupid. Well, number one, they almost went out of business. So they're probably just so scared of doing that again. Like they've tasted... They felt like the weapon up against their back. They know what it's like to be saved at the last minute. Yeah. And so that's probably going to keep them working pretty hard. And maybe that's what Intel needs, is to feel that, so they just, never do the fall apart again. But at the same time, they do have to worry about Apple and maybe Nvidia and Qualcomm, coming at some of their market share too. So I think that would always stop them from being as... I don't think they're going to do, 5% performance increases for 10 years straight, because they just can't because of other competitors.
Yeah. And I mean, you don't want Nvidia coming for your market share, because they have all the money in the world now. So like you can't win. Like they lucked out so hard with the whole AI thing. Like it's like, oh, so the mining boom's over. Now here is just all the money for the next thing. Like it really, damn.
Yeah, we're going to have to see on that one, like how sustainable that is. Because, I mean, of course, Nvidia is going to say it's going to be a $10 bazillion trillion market that, goes to the moon. Of course, they're going to say that, but we're going to have to see if every McDonald's needs 100 H100s for doing blockchain AI or whatever, because I can't help but think that a lot of these companies buying up H100s don't need them, but it's too soon to say. But yeah, when they timed it, I mean, my God, I've seen people, as I saw Pat Gelsinger recently say that Nvidia got lucky. And I'm like, man, if they're lucky, they've been lucky 4 times in a row. I think there's got to be some of this that's not luck over there.
No, for sure. It was just like the timing compared to because it feels like they go from boom to boom to boom. But yeah, like it's crazy. They're an interesting company, because they're also one of those like stock buyback the companies, where they they announce like billions upon billions of dollars of stock buyback. So they are pumping their own stock really hard as well. So there is like, it seems quite bubbly. I don't know. Like
it does, right?
Because like stock buybacks aren't. Yeah, I know that's quite a controversial topic potentially, but that's quite a like not sustainable thing to do if you're sacrificing on like R&D budgets and stuff to do it. Which it's interesting. Like if you look at the consumer space, it does look like every time they go, okay, we're not going to put a 192-bit bus on this thing, we're going to put a 128-bit bus. The money we save on that, stock buyback. Like, is that what they're doing? Because if that's what they're doing, then it's not sustainable, and that's like a bad thing. But
that's the thing I wonder too, is like how much of like what we're seeing right now is with like AMD seems to sell well, when they can get a decent product out that's priced competitively against the competition, but it's just breaking into like OEMs. Like half of this graphics card market share that Nvidia has to just be because laptops refuse to use AMD. And if AMD could break into that and actually sell them in volume at a decent like level, like I think that makes such a huge difference. I mean, like what was it? There was like the Asus ROG laptops, but even those usually have a 3060 or 4060, right? They usually don't have even AMD APU, but then Nvidia GPU. I feel like people regard Nvidia better, but if they were given the option, they tend to buy AMD. They just don't have the option half the time.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think that regarding Nvidia better thing is like they've really not been very nice for a while. Like I think that I don't know how long that goodwill is gonna last, or if there is goodwill towards Nvidia anymore from the consumer side, because it's been I feel like every generation of GPU has been a drama since the 20 series. Like it's been it just keeps happening. Like I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like you got the RTX 20 series drama where people were just like, "Oh my god, an 80 class card for $800? That's unbelievable." And then Jensen said, "Well, hold my beer."
Yeah,
get ready for the next one. And then they like fake prices for Ampere at launch, and then they had, well, not fake, they're real, but they are very high for Lovelace.
So it'll be interesting to see if they're burning all their goodwill, like,
because I think they are burning some. I just think it hasn't materialized, and it's up to AMD to actually exploit it and not just try to make the same thing and then remove 10% of the cost.
Yeah, no, that's true. Wow, my voice really broke there. What was that?
It happens to the best of us. Little Germany writes in and he says, "Hi, Tom. Do you think there is symmetry in ultra-simplified Radeon product stacks in great AMD software? Looking at other markets where software is becoming more important to product performance, like cars even, there is a trend towards much simpler hardware portfolios. So, like, not all of these messy names, and like just have good software and 4 products and just 80, 70, 60, 50, boom, you're done." Yeah, I think that is a thing, but I don't think a company can get away with doing that unless they're like ultra confident and in a dominant position. Because when you see these messy things like a 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte or the 3070 Ti launch and then 3080 12 gigabyte launch and then all of these weird models launch, it's because they're trying to fill a gap against the competition or exploit a situation. And the example that this never happened in actually is Pascal. Mm-hmm. Like Pascal was just 80, 70, 60, and then 50, 50 Ti. And then they launched a 70 Ti, 80 Ti. There's a Titan, that's it. There was none of this like, well, here's the Bizarro version of our, I guess there's the 1063 gigabyte, but that was kind of just getting rid of bad yields. I don't think NVIDIA can do that unless they feel like they're not really challenged. And I actually in my last video argued they should do that with Blackwell. Like just be a little less. You can buy more leather jackets, man. A little less greedy. Come out, price the cards logically with Blackwell, go home. And I think they could get away with it. But I don't think companies can get away with doing that often because they usually have to respond to the competition.
Yeah, but I don't know how much consumers like that. Like I think that, because the thing is, it is quite like a relatively recent thing, and it keeps getting worse. Because I don't think that, you were talking about Pascal, but I think the generations before that as well. Like it wasn't that we were getting TI super cards. It really.
Well, I don't know if you remember the boosts during Kepler. There was the 650, the 650 Ti, the 650 Ti boost.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Boost was basically super. And I don't know if you remember Fermi, but that was when AMD actually had almost the same market share as NVIDIA. And I'm trying to remember all of them because there are so many. But there is the 560 SE, the 560, the 560 Ti, and the 560 Ti 448 edition. Okay. So it's been worse, it's been worse, but Fermi's probably the worst example. But, and God, what did AMD have around that time? Like a little later, I'm trying to think, what is it? The 200 series, where they have the 290X, 290, 285, 280X, 280, 270. I think there was a 270. I mean, there's been bizarre product stacks. I think it's always just them launching, rushing something out the door to compete. I agree. I don't think consumers like it. That's why I think if you can get away with it, dude, 80, 70, 60, 50, TI, leave.
Yeah, I actually forgot about that, because even with the 7970, there was also like 800 versions of that card, because there's like a gigahertz and like a gigahertz plus and then a minus. And
there was the gigahertz toxic from Sapphire, the 7950. I believe there was a 7890, a 7870X gigahertz, a 7850, 7790, 7770, 7750. I have a bizarre brain for remembering these things. Like it's the one thing I can do well that only is useful for this YouTube channel.
Well, I mean, it's great that it's worked out for you then, because you can utilize it so effectively now. Like that's, yeah, like it's...
I could just Google it too. I'm not sure how like what else could I be putting in my brain that isn't remembering the 7790, which by the way was GCN 1.1, the same architecture as the 290X. Like, why do I remember that?
I think you should join pub quizzes that like you should like write a really hectic pub quiz and then just
invite everyone to a quiz. It's only a quiz on AMD, Intel, and Nvidia product naming. You're all screwed. But let me see here. QH Freddy writes, and he says, how much would you bet Navi 43 is 192-bit? So when he says 43, he means the top RDNA 4 mid-range card. What about 256-bit or 128-bit? How much would you bet there's another die on top of it in the lineup? Well, no, I think it's 256-bit. I think that at least one thing we can see with AMD is their mid-range card is almost always 256-bit. I'd say RDNA 2 is the exception to the rule, right? They usually have a 256-bit card that they sell in the middle of the stack. And I think moving forward, I do think we can just pretty much bet Nvidia's is going to be 192-bit or 128-bit too.
Yeah, the smallest number they can fit in there, they'll get it going.
Yeah, well, that's the one argument someone at Nvidia made to me that I thought made a lot of sense for that is they're like, well, if we make the 106 die, which is used in the 4060 Ti, 128-bit, that means we can fit it in the same motherboards that before could only fit the what would that have been, the 3050. So that was their idea. Like, if we can make the bus this small, only require this many memory chips, that means we can put 4070s in old 3050 laptops. That means we can put 4090s really 4080 in old 38 in old, not even 38, well, I guess they called it the 3080, but 104 3070 desktop laptop, so if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So it's like a laptop, like PCIe lane issue, or
it's like they want to be able to fit they are going to call it high-end card with only this many memory chips, so it takes up less space on the laptop motherboard. Like there's something to that. Having said that, though, again, I think adding another 32 bits to the bus, like going from 128 to 160, so you have 10 gigabytes. I think that adds like 10 millimeters squared. So like whatever, then give us 10 gigabytes on desktop and don't on laptop. I don't know. That's my perspective on that, though.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Let me see. I think we've gotten through most of the topics we wanted to get to, but we did have some fun questions that I skipped. Yeah. So XTX999 writes in, what was your favorite product launch this year?
So we actually discussed the thing. I think it's the 5700 or 5600 X3, like the kind of like souped up version of that very popular CPU. I really like it.
This right here, this is your favorite. This is your favorite launch of the year.
Yeah, even though I haven't gotten one because I don't live near a micro center, but I really hope the 5500 X3D comes out. That would be cool.
You're in Vancouver, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you apparently don't live like within 1,000 miles of one.
It's quite far, yeah.
But it's funny because if you go to like around Atlanta, Chicago, the Northeast of the United States, there's a few in most areas. Apparently in the Northeast, no. They just hate Portland, Seattle. Of course, they're probably not in Canada. I don't know if they are. But it's just funny to when I say 1,000 miles, I mean like, no, you're literally 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Clean Sweep writes, and he says, hey, Dawid, what's the most entertaining wonky tech product you've touched or looked at in 2023?
Maybe it's because my memory is pretty short, but there was a recent, like I bought the cheapest like racing sim setup from Amazon, and that thing was a huge piece of crap. Like it was wildly
I think I saw that thumbnail.
It was wildly terrible. Like the mounting method for like, now racing sim stuff is quite physical. You really have to like.
Do you know how much it costs to get it?
So the wheel with the base, and I got like a stand for it as well, was $157 US. So that's including the like. It's
that's
like
real. It was the wheel and the seat and all of it for just that much.
No, not the seat, but so for like racing sim stuff, you can buy like a. They call it like a cockpit, but it's basically just like a couple metal tubes that like are supposed to hold it in place. And that was somehow worse than the actual wheel, because it couldn't hold its own.
Was it
weight up.
Mocha Pit? Mocha Pit? I'm trying to find one because I found one here for $130. I just want to get a picture in my head of what this looked like. But I'm sorry, I don't want to derail your train of thought.
So I bought it off Amazon Canada. Let me see. Racing Sim. Oh wait, I can check my. I'm not going to leak my stuff here. I can look at like old orders and I can give you the name of it. But it was so the Racing Sim base used like suction cups to attach to the table, which means it didn't attach to the table. It would just keep coming off. So I ended up having to duct tape it to the stand, but then the stand couldn't hold its own weight up. So I had to duct tape the stand to a desk for it to, so there was just so much duct tape went into that setup working. So the steering wheel stand is called the Vivor gaming steering wheel stand. So that I bought it on Amazon Canada. I don't know if it's available.
Oh, I found it.
Oh, you did? Yeah,
$74.
Yeah, it was wildly terrible.
The Thrustmaster.
Yeah, I can't.
I don't like that name. I feel like don't Google that.
Yeah. So I'd say that was probably the worst piece of tech and the funniest in how bad it was, because it didn't even almost do what it pretended it was able to do. Yeah.
I guess have you played with those much before in the past, or is this just like, hey, if it's this cheap, I'll see if it's fun? And the answer was no.
Yeah. So it was my, because I went to Computex this year, and like at Computex, they had these crazy looking sim racing setup. So I was like, I really want to give this a try, but I'm going to do it in a me way, which is buy the crappiest version of it. And it was so terrible. But I then did a follow-up video where I bought like a bunch of used stuff and like actual functioning sim racing stuff. And it's like the most fun I've had on a PC in a while. Like I really enjoyed it a lot. So I'm going to do another video following up on like higher end stuff, because it's a deep rabbit hole that you can go down, the sim racing stuff, and it's really fun. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. That is the entire script, I believe, of stuff we had to talk about here. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to discuss, whether it's something that happened this year or something you're excited about next year.
I think we've kind of discussed all of it. Like this was a very thorough like look at the last year and what's coming up. So yeah, no, I think it's about covered.
All right. Well, I want to, of course, thank you for coming on the podcast yet again for an end of year episode. Please plug your channel or anything else you want to.
I think the me chatting about the the terrible racing stand is kind of the most realistic way in which I can plug the channel. Like, it's just dumb crap basically that's techie that I then see how terrible it is kind of the content I enjoy making the most.
But sometimes you're pleasantly surprised. It's not always terrible stuff, but a lot of it is.
Yeah. I'm pleasantly surprised. Wow, none of that came out well. I'm pleasantly surprised a lot. Like, it's, yeah.
All right. Well, that's Dawid Does Tech Stuff, of course, is where you can find him. And then, of course, thank you for watching, listening to this. This episode should come out right after Christmas. Of course, if you're a patron, it's already come out. Remember, if you support us there, you can get a die shrink this week as well, and then early access to the next one, the ability to ask us questions. And no matter what, though, please support us on Patreon to get access to that. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, everybody. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Have a good holiday season.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugad as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page page in the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carry No Sugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Foles, Z Jits, Daniel D, Ian Clifford, Aaron Close, Jen Rauner, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, Brian Regelman, MJB1, Sam Miller, Deke, SNES Chalmers, Nicholas Buckner, Jeremy Verriera, Valcom Aleb, Jensen Wang, Andrew S, Gregory S. Ecker, Sarcastro, Evan Dingle, HardForum.com, Chris Rich, Greg Wantek, 3DS Boy 08, Hal Booma, Compressed Earth Blocks, Shredbird, Dr. Foreman, Benjamin Cannon, Jonathan Blake, Franco Frederick, Holden Mobley, Jake Do 23, Jake Martin, Simi Wallace, Slicky, Jordan Simkovic, Stefan Hart, Julian Leaked, Meat and Pork, The Boss Haas, Tim Robb, Penta Winta, Travis Gooding, Stefan, Mad, Zutsu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Roger Davies, Michael McGee, Greg, Patrick Groh, Amiable Chief, Tommy, Mark Mitchell, Ishud, Mark Raidmaker, James Anderson, Cole Attic, Judson End, Chrysantine, Colin Tadars, The Eternal Dreamers, Cameron, Wesley Sager, Henry Zhang, Neithra Zing, Michelle Pell, D31337 Antics, Hexa Puma, Toka, Reginald Ari, Tika Autumn, Jackson Miller, JSMMH, Gaiman Since Reagan, Jeff Sedler, Loophole 35, Windstar, James I, Raider, Corey Leonard, Little Germany, Shay, Milton, Pulse Media, Dave Schultz, Melodic Warrior, Mac Daffy, Steven Dix, Chuck Glidden, Brett Jones, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, I-7-11700K, Jamie Witters, Joe Foot, Hardland, Slushboss C2, Mai Sharona, Earth Taurus, Jensen Angima, Joseph Kelly, Samuel Park, Keith Moore, Himsa Gung, Tails2299, Mil Vale Vega, John, Vinty CZ, Sisyphos, The Forbidden Juice, Per Leakman, RB Racer, AZ, Richard Cowgill, Win Wang, Michael Cozy, Dr. J Mad, Alex Vega, Freedy, Brian Wright, John Swin, Jola Martina, Kikum, Elbergun, Solarized 80, Thalo215, Matthew Marlowe, Raisin Biscuit, Rennick 1982, Jeff Johnson, Rowan McKicky, Cornstir 671, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music. And Jesse, come on, stop looking down. And thank you to everybody who watched this year. Seriously, have a Merry Christmas, have a Happy Hanukkah, any other holiday you celebrate, happy holidays, and have a great new year, everybody. And here's to seeing you all in the next year.